The moment you need to win, you've already lost. Nietzsche. Have you ever been in a conversation where no matter what you say, it feels like you're losing ground? You explain yourself, clarify, defend your point, and yet somehow, the more you speak, the smaller you feel. You walk away asking yourself, why did I even engage? Why do I feel like they won, even though I made good points? Why do I always get pulled into these exhausting dynamics? Maybe you've been around people who seem to dominate every room. The loud talkers, the interrupters, the know-it-alls. They argue confidently. They twist words skillfully. They bait you into defending yourself. And before you know it, you're dancing to their tune. We live in a world where we're taught you need to speak up to be respected. You need to defend yourself to stay strong. You need to have the last word to win. And so we over-explain. We overreact. We try to out-talk those who unsettle us. But here's the secret Nietzsche saw, and it's devastating. The moment you need to win, you've already lost, because the need to prove yourself is itself a sign of weakness. Friedrich Nietzsche, one of the most brilliant and misunderstood philosophers, was fascinated by power. Not the noisy, showy kind, but the quiet, effortless kind. He understood something few people dare to admit. Those who talk too much reveal their insecurity. Those who need to win arguments are already exposed. Those who crave validation are handing over their power on a silver platter. Nietzsche's genius was in seeing that real power doesn't look like domination. It looks like indifference. It's the kind of strength that doesn't flinch, doesn't chase, doesn't explain. And this terrifies people, because when you refuse to play the game, you break the rules they're depending on. Let me ask you, have you ever stayed silent in the middle of a heated conversation and watched the other person unravel? Have you ever calmly walked away from someone trying to provoke you and seen their frustration skyrocket? Have you ever held your ground without needing to convince, explain, or justify, and felt a strange, quiet power rise inside you? That's the force Nietzsche points us toward. But here's where many get it wrong. Most people confuse silence with submission. They think staying quiet makes them a doormat. And they're right, if your silence comes from fear. But Nietzsche isn't talking about fearful silence. He's talking about something radically different. A silence that comes from strength. A silence that says, I don't owe you anything. Not my explanation, not my energy, not my participation. This script is for anyone who's tired of being baited into conflict. It's for anyone exhausted by the need to prove their worth. It's for anyone ready to trade noisy performance for quiet, devastating authority. Because here's the deeper promise Nietzsche offers. The one who speaks least often holds the most power. So what can you expect from this journey? We're going to explore why the need to respond is your ego's greatest trap, how non-reaction becomes a weapon of dominance, how to project presence in power without lifting a finger, how to train yourself to stay calm under attack, and most importantly, how to break free from the exhausting dance of defending, explaining, and chasing approval. Imagine walking into a room and commanding respect without saying a word, listening to insults or challenges, and remaining unshaken, leaving a conversation knowing you gave away nothing, not your peace, not your control, not your dignity. This is the kind of strength Nietzsche points us toward. It's not loud. It's not performative. It's not needy. It's quiet. It's sovereign. It's untouchable. So I invite you to stay with me, because by the end of this journey you will see why the loudest person in the room is often the weakest, why restraint is the highest form of dominance, and how you can master the art of outsmarting anyone without saying a word. Let's begin. Let's pause and ask something we rarely question. Why do we feel such a desperate need to respond? Why, when someone challenges us, do we rush to explain ourselves, to defend our point, to prove that we're right? Where does that sharp inner pull come from? That almost automatic urge to push back, argue, or correct? The answer cuts deeper than we like to admit. We've been conditioned to believe something, that silence means defeat, that if we don't defend ourselves, we are allowing others to win. that our worth is tied to our ability to stand up, speak out, and fight back. But Friedrich Nietzsche saw this completely differently. He believed that the need to justify, to explain, to defend is not a sign of strength. It's a symptom of weakness. Let that land for a moment. What we often mistake for bravery, speaking up, pushing back, fighting to be heard, Nietzsche saw as evidence of inner fragility. Because behind that need to respond is something we often refuse to name: fear. Fear of looking weak, fear of being misunderstood, fear of being dismissed, mocked, or rejected. And at the root of that fear, the ego. Nietzsche understood that the ego is, by nature, fragile. It cannot stand to be questioned. It confuses disagreement with a personal attack. It turns every conversation into a battlefield, every disagreement into a threat to its survival. Ask yourself, have you ever been in a conversation where someone challenges you, and even though part of you knows it's not that important, you feel a surge of heat, a tightening in your chest, a magnetic pull to correct them, to defend your point? That's the ego. It can't let go. It needs to be right. It needs to be seen as smart, good, justified. And here's the brilliant insight Nietzsche saw. Most people, when they argue, are not searching for truth. They're searching for power. Winning an argument becomes a way to restore ego balance. To be seen as right is to feel momentarily safe, strong, and superior. But Nietzsche warned us, this is all illusion. Because when you get pulled into that game, when you argue, explain, defend, you have already handed over your power. You've stepped onto a battlefield you never needed to enter. You've handed your peace to someone else's control. Nietzsche called this herd morality. It's the behavior of those who live under the spell of others' approval, who shape themselves to please, to perform, to win status. At first glance, it looks harmless, even virtuous. But Nietzsche saw the danger. When you live for approval, you stop living for yourself. You become a puppet, your strings pulled by others' reactions. And here's the great paradox. The more you chase approval, the weaker you become. Every time you rush to defend your opinion, every time you explain yourself to win validation, you're reinforcing a hidden belief that your worth depends on others, that your truth only matters if it's accepted by the crowd. Nietzsche offers us a radical alternative. True strength isn't about convincing others. It's about no longer needing to. It's about holding your truth, even when you are misunderstood, standing firm, even when others laugh, criticize, or reject you, being misunderstood, and remaining unshaken. This kind of strength doesn't win arguments. It doesn't need to, because it isn't about verbal victory. It's about internal mastery. It's a strength that expands when you stop reacting. It's a power that multiplies when you stop feeding the game. Nietzsche understood something most people miss. The argument is theater. Everyone is playing a role. And the first person to leap up, to defend, to shout, is the first person to fall into the trap. But the one who remains still, silent, observing, that's the one holding the real power. Because here's the hidden secret. The reactive mind is a captured mind, but the observing mind, that's the dangerous one. It can't be manipulated. It sees clearly. It acts deliberately. It refuses to be pulled into petty games. Nietzsche dares us to ask, what would it mean to stop playing the role of the reactor and step into the role of the observer? What would it feel like to hold your ground, not by fighting, but by simply standing still? To be so rooted in yourself that you don't need to explain, don't need to prove, don't even need to speak, because your mere presence is already enough? That is a completely different level of power, and this leads to one of Nietzsche's most provocative ideas. To embody this strength fully, we must become the Übermensch, the overman, the being who transcends the ordinary, who rises above the need for approval, who no longer reacts to the world but shapes it through sheer presence. In the next section, we will explore exactly what the Übermensch is and how you can begin to embody that power in your own life. Because once you step into that level of mastery, you will understand something incredible. You don't win by out-talking anyone. You win by being the one person in the room who no longer needs to speak. Let's keep going. Nietzsche didn't write for the faint of heart. His words weren't designed to comfort. They were meant to challenge, sharpen, and transform. He spoke not to the crowd, but to the rare kind of person with the courage to look within, to face their own weakness, their own vanity, their own ego, and to forge strength out of that fire. For Nietzsche, most people live trapped in what he called slave morality. They cling to convention. They follow the crowd. They shape themselves to fit expectations, always seeking approval, always fearing rejection. But Nietzsche imagined something more, a higher kind of human being, a rare figure he called the Übermensch, the overman, the one who rises above. This Übermensch isn't just stronger or smarter. He is someone who has transcended the need to react. He doesn't live in response to the world. He shapes the world by his very presence. And here's the most astonishing part. The Übermensch's greatest strength often comes through silence. Let's be clear, the Übermensch doesn't waste energy on petty battles. He doesn't engage in trivial arguments. He doesn't need to prove himself. Instead, he watches, he listens, he waits. And when he does speak, his words are precise, measured, and deliberate, not to win approval, but to move mountains. But more often than not, he doesn't need to speak at all, because the Übermensch knows something others have yet to understand. Silence is a form of dominance. This silence is not empty. It's not passive. It's not weakness. It is a force. It commands attention. It creates tension. It destabilizes the room. Picture it. While others raise their voices, he holds his gaze. While others scramble to explain, he remains still, absorbing everything. His silence becomes a kind of mirror, reflecting the insecurities, fears, and neediness of those around him. And here's the fascinating part. The more silent the Übermensch becomes, the louder everyone else's noise sounds. Why? Because human beings are deeply uncomfortable with silence, especially in moments of conflict or confrontation. Most people use words to fill the void, cover uncertainty, control the narrative. But when you don't engage, when you leave the space open, you force them to confront themselves. Nietzsche understood this instinctively. He knew, the one who can hold silence, calm, present, unmoved, holds the true power. This is why the Übermensch is so dangerous. He can walk into a room, say nothing, and still become the most powerful person there. Because true power isn't loud, it's felt. And here's the twist that most people miss. Silence is not just an absence. It's a strategy. The Übermensch uses silence the way a master chess player uses time. Patiently, deliberately, watching the board unfold, not reacting to the immediate move, but planning 5, 10, 15 moves ahead. His silence sends a message. I don't need your validation. I don't play by your rules. I don't even need to respond because your words have no hold on me. And that shakes people to their core. In a world where everyone is scrambling to be seen, to be heard, to be validated, the one who doesn't need any of it is unstoppable. Nietzsche's Übermensch lives by his own values. He is not bound by the morality of the herd. He is not bound by the expectations of society. And because of that, he is feared, not for his words, but for his presence. His silence is like a wall, smooth, impenetrable, unmoving. And here's what happens next. Those facing that wall, who expect a reaction and don't get one, begin to unravel. They talk faster. They become defensive. They reveal more than they intended. They lose balance because the silence forces them inward. And not everyone is ready for that. This is why Nietzsche's Übermensch is not only a master of himself, but a master of any room he steps into. His power flows not from domination of others, but from absolute command over his own mind, his own reactions, his own presence. And this is the heart of the lesson. If you want to outsmart anyone without saying a word, it starts with mastering yourself. Master your urges to react. Master your impulse to explain. Master your craving to be seen and validated. Because when you no longer need those things, you rise to a level where no one can touch you. This is the challenge Nietzsche offers, not just to think differently, but to be different, to live it, to embody it, to practice it, moment by moment, breath by breath. In the next section, we're going to break down exactly why silence has such a disruptive psychological effect on others. We'll explore what happens inside the human mind when it confronts not noise, but stillness. Because once you understand how silence disarms, destabilizes, and reveals, you will never look at it the same way again. Stay with me. Let's step inside the mind. Not yours, but the mind of the person facing your silence. Imagine this. They've just said something sharp, provocative, maybe even cutting. They expect a reaction. They're ready for the usual dance, the back and forth, the push and pull, the heated exchange. But instead, nothing. A pause that stretches just a little too long, a stillness that starts to feel heavy. Here's where it gets fascinating. Most people think silence is just empty space, but psychologists and Nietzsche knew better. Silence is not empty. Silence is a mirror. Silence is pressure. When you hold your silence, when you refuse to be baited, you force the other person to confront something most people spend their whole lives avoiding, themselves. Without your reaction, without your words to bounce off, without the usual argument or defense, the spotlight turns inward. And that, for most people, is profoundly uncomfortable. Modern psychology tells us that silence in tense moments is rarely perceived as neutral. Instead, silence is often read as judgment. Even if you're just sitting calmly, the person speaking starts to feel exposed, unsettled, on edge. Why? Because when you don't react, they lose control of the narrative. They can't read you. They don't know if you agree, disagree, or see right through them. And that uncertainty, it's like fuel to the fire of anxiety. Inside their brain, the amygdala, the part responsible for fear and threat detection, begins to light up. Suddenly, they're flooded with thoughts. Are they judging me? Did I say something wrong? Why aren't they answering? What are they thinking? That's the silent power Nietzsche pointed to. Silence doesn't just disarm, it destabilizes. Why do people unravel in the face of silence? Because most people don't speak to express truth. They speak to protect themselves, to convince themselves, to maintain control. And when you don't give them a reaction, you pull that control away. Think about it. Have you ever stayed quiet while someone talked themselves in circles? Have you watched someone become more flustered the longer you stayed silent? Have you seen them over-explain, overshare, or reveal things they didn't intend? That's not a fluke. That's psychology at work. Social psychology studies show that in moments of high tension, silence increases discomfort, vulnerability, and often leads the other person to expose more than they meant to. Here's where the power sharpens even more. Silence doesn't just rattle the insecure, it disarms manipulators. People who bait you with guilt, drama, or passive aggression need one thing to survive: your reaction. Without it, their whole game collapses. When you stay calm, centered, silent, when you offer no defense, no justification, no anger, you break their script. They scramble for new tactics, but nothing sticks because you've stepped out of the game entirely. There's something even deeper here, something Nietzsche saw long before modern psychology confirmed it. Silence taps into a primal human fear, the fear of rejection, of being unseen, unheard, insignificant. When you don't react, you're signaling, without words, you are not the center of my world. Your words don't control me. You don't get to define my reality. And for people whose ego depends on control or dominance, this is often intolerable, especially for the loudest in the room, the ones accustomed to being the sharpest, the most commanding. Your silence is like an invisible strike straight to their pride. But here's the paradox. Silence doesn't just require strength from others, it requires strength from you. Because let's be honest, staying silent when every part of you wants to react is one of the hardest skills you'll ever master. It goes against everything we're taught. Speak your mind. Stand up for yourself. Don't let people walk all over you. But Nietzsche flips the script. Real mastery isn't about saying more. It's about knowing when not to say anything at all. Silence is an art. It's a discipline. It's a practice. And when you learn to wield it deliberately, it becomes one of your most lethal tools. In the next part, we'll shift from theory to practice. You'll learn how to use silence as a strategy, not an accident. How to know when to hold back, when to speak, and how to apply this power across work, relationships, and conflict. Because once you understand how to turn silence into a strategic weapon, you'll never get pulled into petty arguments again. Let's keep going. Now that you understand why silence is so powerful, the question becomes, how do you actually use it? How do you turn silence from a passive habit into an active, deliberate strategy? One that commands respect, rattles manipulators, and keeps you in control? Let's break this down into 4 practical techniques you can begin using today. First, the discipline of non-reaction. This is the foundation, and honestly, it's the hardest part. Whenever you feel that intense urge to react, whether it's a sharp comment, a defensive jab, or a heated outburst, pause. Hold your ground. Let the silence stretch. Your mind will beg for release. Your ego will demand you defend yourself. Your body will feel restless, almost panicked. But this is your moment of power. Remember, every time you react impulsively, you hand over control. You reveal your insecurities. You expose your emotional soft spots. The discipline of non-reaction is like building a muscle. At first, it's uncomfortable. But the more you resist the urge to fill the space, the stronger you become. And over time, that tension, the pressure to explain yourself, begins to dissolve. And in its place, you'll discover something priceless: calm, clarity, true presence. Second, listening like a hunter. Most people listen only to prepare their next reply. But true mastery? Listen like a hunter, calm, focused, alert. When someone speaks, especially under stress, they reveal far more than they intend. Watch their tone, their body language, the words they stumble over, the subtle contradictions in their argument. Don't rush to respond. Let them talk themselves out. Observe where their mask slips, because here's the secret. When the time comes to speak, if you even choose to, you'll know exactly where to aim. But most of the time, your silence will already have done the work. Third, the power of the pause. Silence isn't just about withholding words. It's also about how you deliver them when you do speak. Here's the move. When you speak, pause before you answer. Let your words land, then pause again. This does 2 things. It builds tension, and it signals absolute control. A well-placed pause can be more powerful than a long speech. It tells the room, I am deliberate. I am unshaken. I am not here to perform. In confrontational moments, these pauses allow you to slow the tempo, regain control, and unsettle the person across from you. Master the pause and you master the rhythm of the room. Fourth, becoming unpredictable. Predictability is weakness. If people know exactly how you'll react, they can manipulate you. But when you become unpredictable, when you choose silence in one moment, a cutting word the next, and then return to calm observation, you keep people off balance. They start to doubt themselves. They tread more carefully. They lose the advantage because they can no longer read your next move. This is where silence reaches its full power, not as absence, but as a tool for psychological dominance. Instead of reacting to them, they start reacting to you. Your silence becomes the gravitational center of every interaction. Finally, a bonus insight: active silence versus passive silence. Not all silence is created equal. Passive silence happens when you retreat out of fear, uncertainty, or submission. It feels weak, and because it is. Active silence, on the other hand, is charged with intention. It's not that you have nothing to say, it's that you're choosing not to say it. This silence has weight. It vibrates with presence, and people can feel the difference. When you practice active silence, you step into true mastery. You're no longer withholding out of fear. You're commanding the room without noise. That's where real transformation begins. By now, you're starting to see, silence isn't just a tactic. It's a way of being. It requires discipline. It requires clarity. And most of all, it requires the courage to step outside the noise. To let your presence speak louder than your words ever could. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Sometimes silence is mistaken for submission. Sometimes people try to use your quietness against you. In the next section, we'll explore when silence becomes disempowering, how to recognize when it's time to break the silence, and how to reclaim your power when others think your quiet is weakness. Because to truly master silence, you need to know when it serves you and when it's holding you back. Let's continue. We've spent this journey exploring how silence can be a weapon, a tool for power, clarity, and control. But now we need to face the other side of the coin. Because as powerful as silence can be, there's a darker side. Not all silence is strength. Sometimes silence is submission in disguise. Let's be honest. There are moments when you stay quiet, not because you're strong, but because you feel small. You swallow your words not out of mastery, but out of fear. Fear of conflict, fear of being judged, fear of rocking the boat. And the hardest part? You may have convinced yourself that you're doing the mature thing, that keeping quiet is wisdom, that letting things slide is peacekeeping. But Nietzsche would have challenged that belief without mercy. He saw what most people miss, that what we often call peace is really just well-dressed surrender. It's a way of shrinking ourselves to avoid discomfort. Think about it. How many times have you let someone dominate a conversation, make a decision for you, cross a boundary, and told yourself it's not worth the fight? You probably felt proud of your calmness in the moment, but later, that tight feeling in your chest returned. That quiet voice whispered, you gave something away. And here's the dangerous part. Other people notice it too. They see your silence. And if your silence feels weak, they begin to take advantage. They push harder. They speak over you. They fill the space that should have been yours. And little by little, often without even realizing it, you begin to disappear from your own life. Nietzsche warned us about this trap. He called it slave morality, a value system that teaches you to be good, obedient, self-sacrificing, even if it costs you your own power. It's a system that praises submission and convinces you that staying small is virtuous. But Nietzsche wasn't writing for those who want to stay small. He was writing for those ready to break their chains, for those ready to stop confusing politeness with powerlessness, for those ready to stop mistaking silence born of fear for silence born of mastery. Because here's the raw truth. When your silence is rooted in fear, guilt, or avoidance, it's not protecting you. It's burying you. You start to feel like you're losing control of your own life. Not because others are stronger, but because you've been quietly handing your power away, bit by bit. But here's where the real shift begins. The same silence that once trapped you can become the silence that frees you, if you reclaim it with intention. This is what Nietzsche's philosophy dares us to do. To stop being passive observers of our own lives, to stop letting others shape who we are, to stand up, not always with words, but with a silence so solid, so filled with presence, so unshakable, that no one mistakes it for submission again. So how do you make this shift? It begins with a question. Every time you choose silence, ask yourself, am I staying quiet because I'm strong or because I'm scared? If it's fear, that's your cue to lean in, to set a boundary, to speak a simple, clear truth when needed. But if your silence is rooted in clarity, self-respect, and calm, that's the golden silence Nietzsche admired. It's not about reacting to every insult. It's not about fighting every battle. It's about knowing your silence is a choice, not a cage, that your silence is charged with power, not drained by fear. And when you stand in that space, something profound happens. You stop shrinking. You stop leaking energy. You stop playing small. And the world around you shifts in response. The people who once dominated the room, they go quiet. The people who once underestimated you, they feel the change, even if they can't name it. The people who once counted on your passivity, they start treading carefully, because now your silence commands respect. Not because you demanded it, but because you embodied it. This is the silence of the Übermensch, the silence of someone who has mastered themselves. Not by retreating, not by avoiding, but by standing fully present, calm, grounded, immovable. And here's the deepest truth Nietzsche points us toward. At the highest level, silence isn't about others at all. It's about you. It's about reclaiming the space inside yourself. It's about no longer needing to prove, explain, or defend. Because you have nothing to prove. You are enough. Your presence is enough. And the power you've been chasing out there, it was inside you all along. In the final part of this journey, we'll tie it all together, and I'll show you how to turn this new silence into a daily practice so you never slip back into the old patterns again. Stay with me. You've made it to this point, and that tells me something important. You are not someone content with surface-level strength. You're here for something deeper, something real. Let's pause, take a breath, and reflect on the ground we've covered. We began with a provocative idea that true strength doesn't come from being the loudest voice in the room or from winning every argument, but from mastering the art of silence. We looked through Nietzsche's sharp lens, seeing how society tricks us into believing that constant explanation, defense, and noise equals power. We cracked open that illusion. We discovered that silence disarms, forcing others to wrestle with their own noise and insecurity. Silence destabilizes, flipping the power dynamic on those who try to control you with words. Silence reveals, exposing where true power lives, not in the chaos of the world, but in the calm at your core. We explored the psychology behind this, why silence makes people so uncomfortable, why it activates their hidden fears, and why it gives you a surprising edge over even the most cunning manipulators. We moved from insight to action. You learned how to discipline your reactions, how to listen like a hunter, how to use pauses and unpredictability as quiet sources of dominance. And we didn't stop there. We faced the shadow side. We saw how sometimes silence isn't strength, it's fear dressed as peace. We named the trap of shrinking, of pleasing, of avoiding conflict. And we learned how to reclaim silence as a choice, not a prison. And now, here we are, at the threshold. The insights you've gathered today, they're not just ideas, they're tools. And like any tool, their power depends on how you use them. So here's your challenge. Starting today, begin practicing intentional silence. When you feel the pull to react, pause. When someone tries to bait you into drama, breathe. When you catch yourself shrinking from discomfort, ask yourself, is this silence coming from fear or from strength? Slowly, day by day, you will build a new reflex, a way of holding your ground with quiet presence, not noise. And you will feel something extraordinary happen. You'll stop needing to explain. You'll stop needing to defend. You'll stop needing to prove. Your presence will do the speaking for you. And inside, a deeper confidence will rise, calm, grounded, untouchable. This is the path Nietzsche laid before us. Not a path of noise, but of clarity. Not a life of constant battle, but of sovereign power. It's the path of the Übermensch, the one who rises above the herd, who masters their own being, and who walks through the world untouched by its noise. And here's what I want to leave you with. The world doesn't need more people shouting to be heard. It doesn't need more endless debates or louder voices. It needs people who have done the inner work, people whose silence carries weight, people whose presence leads, not by volume, but by substance. You are ready to be that person. If this message stirred something inside you, if you feel that shift already beginning, mark it. Drop a comment below with the words, I choose powerful silence. Not just for me, for yourself, to anchor this shift into your daily life. And if you haven't yet, subscribe, because we are just getting started. In the next video, we'll go even deeper into psychological resilience, into mental toughness, into becoming the kind of person who doesn't just survive life's storms, but thrives through them. Remember, the weak shout, the strong stay silent, and the wise, they choose their words and their silences with precision. This is your path now, and I'm honored to walk it beside you. I'll see you in the next video.